So I found it kind of funny when I saw that the topic of this night's talk was why we've lost faith in Rishi Sunak and this government. Because I'm now left asking myself why we would have any faith left in them. Our political system is blatantly broken, and we're all living the consequences of it. You know, we have a prime minister who no one voted for, who is crashing our economy, and is quite content to let ordinary people pay the price, as him and his mates in the 1% stay protected. We have a cabinet full of criminals. They're breaking domestic and international laws, who in any other job would have been sacked by now, whilst desperate mothers who are forced to resort to stealing baby formula and Calpol are the ones being prosecuted. Despite being the 6th richest country in the world, the UK now has one of the highest food poverty rates in Europe, with an ever-rising number of people becoming reliant on using food banks. Yet, somehow it's still deemed a necessity to subsidise MPs' lunchtime wine. This government has been found guilty of not meeting their own legally binding net zero agreements, whilst scared young people like myself taking action to secure themselves a future are prosecuted under draconian new protest laws, coming from the PCSE bill, which Rishi Sunak has openly admitted was drafted by a fossil fuel funded think tank. And now they're even rolling back on the few net zero promises they made, content to plunge us into a future of increased storms and floods and wildfires and droughts. Their only solutions to the obvious subsequent mass displacement of people is refugee prison boats or flights to Rwanda. Their only solutions to the subsequent food scarcity due to crop failure is to produce British cheese. Whole system is broken, and they think they can get away with taking us for fools. Honestly, I spend quite a lot of my time angry about this. Actually, I don't think angry cuts it. I'm fucking furious at all this suffering and how needless it is. How things could be different. And yet we're told we have to comply with this bullshit. And the lists of reasons to be angry is only growing as injustice grows. And we've heard about over 100 new oil and gas licenses being approved, following the rollback on net zero agreements, followed by the approval of the Rosebank oil field. That's the largest undeveloped oil field in the North Sea. I am also finding more reasons to have hope. It's important to recognise that. And I'm mostly finding that in people who are realising that we don't have to follow the rules of a game that has always been rigged. As nurses and railway workers and teachers and posties and bin men go on strike, as public figures like Chris Packham, who joins us today, normalise civil resistance as the ethically responsible thing to do in response to the climate crisis. And as I speak to more people every day than ever before who are fed up with all of the Tories' deceit and corruption and are ready to take to the streets with Just Stop Oil, I really feel like I found my own power when I stepped into civil resistance. And I feel the force of our collective power growing every day. Part of that collective power are the inspiring people joining this discussion tonight, who are renowned for their action within civil resistance, climate justice, and social change. I will talk with Chris Packham, Jeremy Corbyn, and Lucas Winnips, and hear from Just Stop Oil's own Kiara and Indigo. These talks will then be followed by breakout rooms, and these are a space if you want to join a Just Stop Oil facilitator in a smaller room to discuss how you feel after hearing the talk. And these will last for about 15 minutes to half an hour, depending on the size of the rooms. Now, before the rooms, there's going to be a poll launched, which we'd really appreciate if you could answer, because the poll is to see what pathways to action you are willing to take and how you want to get involved in the campaign. So I'm just going to go over quickly the ways that people do support Just Stop Oil. The first thing that people are doing is signing up to Slow March with Just Stop Oil and committing to at least one arrest. We're going to be marching every single day in London from the 29th of October to the 19th of November. The second thing that people are doing is attending a non-violence training. That isn't me saying that this seems like a call of violent nutters, but this is a full day training session where we learn the skills and resilience to be in non-violent civil resistance and join our community of trust. The third thing people are doing is volunteering their time to help the campaign, using whatever skills and tools you have in your own life and energy to resist. There are so many different ways that you can get involved volunteering, and there's going to be an interest form posted and a Zoom which explains lots of those different ways. And the fourth thing that people are doing is people are donating. I don't like asking for money when we're all suffering under the same cost of living crisis, but unfortunately we are living within the system we're trying to change, and these campaigns need money to keep going. We normally ask that people donate what they make in 1 hour over 1 month, so it's kind of means tested, or if you're a student or unwaged, maybe the cost of a drink. Links are going to be posted in the chat now to make a donation. And these donations are vital to make sure we can support everyone who wants to join the campaign and play their part. Well, let's get started on the panel discussion. And joining me is Jeremy Corbyn, Chris Packham, and Lucas Winnips. Jeremy is the MP for Islington North. He is the leader of the Labour Party and is a lifelong campaigner for peace and social justice. Lucas is the spokesperson of the Stop Fossil Fuel Subsidies campaign of Extinction Rebellion Netherlands, which is part of which is a permanent daily roadblock in The Hague with 10,000 arrests so far. And Chris is a naturalist, a TV broadcaster, and a Just Stop Oil supporter who has recently launched a No New Oil campaign demanding current and aspiring elected leaders include mandatory pledges in their manifestos to end new fossil fuels. Chris recently featured in a mainstream documentary film exploring the question if it's time to break the law in response to the climate crisis. So, Chris, I'll start with a question for you. How has carbon fundamentalism become an obstacle to mobilizing larger demographics around issues like species extinction, deforestation, and the vital need for ecosystem restoration?
Good evening, Phoebe, and thank you for the invitation to attend the webinar. Nice to speak to you again. There are a plethora of problems, all of which are intertwined. I think it's often easy to try and partition them, to manage them in the way that we discuss them, in the way that we think about them, in the way that we present the data which we collect to make sure that people can fully understand the gravity of that situation. But the first thing to say is that we cannot realistically separate what I would call climate breakdown from biodiversity loss. They are intertwined, one affects the other. So partitioning them makes them manageable, but in the grand scheme of things, they are all linked. Sometimes it's an asset to make them manageable, communicable. Other times when we're trying to express to people how collectively dangerous they are and how we are therefore imperiled as a species, indeed many species are imperiled, then it is sort of counterproductive. There's no doubt about that. But at this point in time, what we've seen in the last couple of weeks is an orchestrated onslaught when it comes to fossil fuels and biodiversity. So our government have chosen to make a series of announcements quite closely packed together, some of them quite choreographed in their timing so that they overlap and prevent us from focusing as much attention on these issues. So a case in part this week would have been that the Rosebank drilling was announced at the same time as a relaxation in planning constraints, which would have which were there to protect wildlife and habitats. So justifiably, Rosebank and the drilling has received the lion's share of the news, but behind the scenes, environmentalists and conservationists like myself are very concerned about those policies too. And I don't think this is going to change over the next few months. I think today and yesterday we've seen further announcements, or some we've heard about today that are pending, which have indirect environmental consequences, but are signifying where this government is going. I think in your introduction you expressed how angry you are. My point at the outset is that I imagine that everyone on this call is angry, but what we have to do, and you do so well, is channel your anger into something positive, certainly beginning with self-empowerment. We hope, of course, that if there are people on this call who haven't visited and joined before, this will be an opportunity for them to engage, to become self-empowered and to become part of something which needs to be ever more increasingly, urgently successful. And that's what we're about tonight. We're all here because we know we need to make a difference.
Thank you, Chris. I think you're quite right that we're at a point where if you're not angry, then you're probably not paying attention. It is great to have so many people here who hopefully are willing to do something with that, and I feel much more able to cope with that kind of like anger since putting it into something. Jeremy, now a question for you. In its pursuit of incremental political reformism, has the broad European left lost sight of actual systems change?
Lovely. Thanks very much. And thanks for inviting me on the call. And it's a pleasure to be here with you all and with Chris. And very interested in the good remarks he just made a moment ago. The left across Europe have a very interesting series of positions, some of which are contradictory. But there are very serious trade union campaigns for environmental change and so on. And I was in Ostend 2 weeks ago for Manifesta, which is a sort of left festival held in Ostend, obviously, and there were about 15 to 20,000 people there. Very interesting discussion I got into with some trade unionists from the Netherlands who had been arguing for substantial change to the steelworks where they work to make what they call green steel, which involved not using blast furnaces, but sustainably produced electricity to bring about electric arc furnaces, reuse of scrap metal, and so on. Very interesting. And they'd had this argument with the company for many, many years. And I think that we have to do two things today. One is totally condemn the British government's decision over the new oil fields, which are, as you quite rightly said, been substantially funded by UK taxpayers anyway. They're not necessary. And then the government abandoning the 2030 and probably next will abandon the 2050 target, and also abandoning a whole lot of other things. And Chris is quite right to point out the planning changes. I think that in our campaign for a more sustainable and biodiverse world, we have to campaign at all kinds of levels. Those people that work in what are currently polluting industries are not our enemies. They and their communities are often breathing foul air and living in very poor conditions. There has to be a green industrial revolution, which is about sustainability and is about bringing people with us in that change, which is something I was very, very keen to do. But it's also about education and ensuring that young people understand that we cannot go on like this. The world is being destroyed very rapidly and our biodiversity is disappearing before us. However, many of our communities, the majority of people, have no garden of their own, no open space of their own, and very little interaction with the natural world or nature. So what we do in school, what we do in the early years in school is so very, very important to improve biodiversity. And in the midst of all the horrible news this week, there's one piece of news which actually quite cheered me up, and that was for the island of Redondo off in the Caribbean has been basically restored to nature through removing invasive species from it and allowing migratory birds, insects, and everything else to migrate to it. It's now become an incredibly biodiverse place within the Caribbean. It shows that things can be done, and all around the world there are people doing it. But however, our media completely disempowers us. It doesn't give us the real alternatives and always says, well, we need to protect the environment. We need to do something about climate change. Yes, we should be at net zero. But by the way, we've no intention of doing anything about it. And we'll continue allowing the fossil fuel industry to be in its very powerful lobbying position and force governments to subsidize their work. So take the new oil fields. Those new oil fields are going to be subsidized by us through tax relief. When they're closed down, when they're finally finished and extract the oil from them, we're going to be paying the decommissioning cost as we do with nuclear power stations at the present time. So political campaigning has to go alongside community action to bring about environmental sustainability. That way we bring up a generation of people who are absolutely determined that the generation that has destroyed the environment won't be the ones that whose legacy is to continue that destruction. Instead, there'll be a change. But however, I have to say that as one who introduced the climate emergency motion to the UK Parliament in 2019, I'm extremely depressed by many of the statements that have been made by the Labour front bench in Parliament, which seem to be retreating from the whole strategy that we set forward on a green industrial revolution, on enhancing biodiversity, and above all, making sure that our future energy requirements are met by protecting buildings, insulation, by using all available energy that's already here, ground heat, etc., etc. There's plenty of others, but above all, also promoting alternative energy sources which are available, solar and wind being the obvious ones, but also ground heat. So we can change it, but beware of the greenwash of the very powerful companies. If you look at BP's adverts, you'd think they do nothing else than charge electric vehicles. You'd think they're not involved in any oil exploration anywhere, and they've never been involved in any of the pollution of the Gulf of Mexico or West Africa or anywhere else. So it is about assertive, informed campaigning, but above all, bringing people with us.
Thank you, Jeremy. I certainly share your heartbreak at Labour's complicity with this government's complete failure to take action on the climate crisis. It's really nice to hear you speaking about the trade unionists in the Netherlands, particularly as our my next question is for Lucas from Extinction Rebellion Netherlands. Lucas, why have direct action groups largely ignored taking action directly against the super rich?
Hello, everybody. First of all, thanks for having me. I'm actually living next to that steel plant where Jeremy was talking about. So that's a coincidence. I think there are several things at the same time. One important thing is that in our culture, it's really valued if people make a lot of money in media and culture. So that makes it maybe a little bit difficult to step up and to do something countering that idea. And at the same time, the elite, so to speak, has also a negative connotation. That's quite weird dynamics, I think. It's a lot used in politics as well. And for example, you see it also in climate, that is by certain political parties framed as benefiting the elite. Well, it's of course the other way around, that poor people benefit mostly a lot more from climate measures, also now already in the global south, for example. So maybe that's something you can say about it. And the funny thing is that we here in the Netherlands had last year, November, we had a big action, Greenpeace together with Extinction Rebellion, targeting private jets on the airport. So that's really targeted to the super rich. And that was really quite a success. And measures are being put into place to to tone down the use of private jets. So that's something you maybe can do.
It's great. Thank you, Lucas. Now a question for all of our panelists. Given that the government knows so much overwhelming evidence about climate catastrophe, why do you think they're continuing to approve new oil and gas licenses, going ahead with Rosebank, and going back on their net zero promises? I'll start with you, Jeremy.
Well, there's a number of reasons, but essentially it is the power of lobbying of the fossil fuel industry. The power of lobbying of the big oil companies is absolutely enormous, and the power of the mining companies to greenwash everything. None of them will tell you, for example, that they allow children to be exploited in mining. They're all clean. They all buy their minerals from all the reputable sources and so on. Yet all of our mobile phones come from the Congo, in the sense that coltan and cobalt are essential for the production of a mobile phone. Children are being forced to work in those mines. Same thing happens with oil pollution in Nigeria, in Ecuador, and many other places. They completely ignore all of that. And so it is about challenging all of that. Secondly, whilst they say they're in favor of environmentally sustainable transport, at the same time, they are approving more and more road schemes, and that in turn will encourage more and more traffic. And whilst I think an electric car is much more preferable to a fossil fuel powered car, the reality is it's still traffic on the roads. We want to have much better and much cheaper public transport, which reduces pollution and, of course, the effects of mining. There is no energy production that doesn't have an effect of some sort on the environment. You can't actually run away from it altogether. And so why are they doing this? Essentially, lack of imagination, but above all, the power of lobbying and the enormous profits that are made and the greed that goes with it. And the tax system, which allows a write-off on capital investment, a write-off on recommissioning and so on, which is in effect a gift from all of us as taxpayers to the oil companies. And bear in mind that their profits over the last year have gone up enormously. The gap between the richest and the poorest in our society has grown enormously, and the levels of poverty in this country is something that I think is just a shame on the whole of this country. And so it does require a government to have a completely different strategy, starting with environmental sustainability.
Thank you, Jeremy. Chris, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Well, Jeremy's hit quite a few nails very squarely and firmly on the head there when he's talking about the power of lobbying, the insidious power of lobbying. You mentioned in your introduction those government think tanks which have access to our elected representatives. That's something which is very dangerous, and why we tolerate it, I have no idea. Greed, another key word that Jeremy used there. Profit, another key word that Jeremy has used there. I mean, I would add to it short-termism. And identify the fact that, unfortunately, our systems of governance and the way that we run politics in the UK and indeed in many other parts of the world are simply too short in their periods of office to make meaningful changes when it comes to these sorts of things. And that puts enormous pressure on our politicians to, if they are minded to do so, get into power and then hold on to power. And in order to do so, they cannot afford to alienate their voting supporters. Case in part, many of the things that we need to address cannot be solved in 5 years, and that's the term of governance that we have in the UK. It's impossible. And what we need to do is to make sure that these issues, these environmental issues, which require long-term investment, both financial, effort, energy, ingenuity, new technologies, so on and so forth, need to be supported apolitically. They need to be taken outside of the political system. And I guess to some extent, that's what we do as peaceful democratic protesters. We are not necessarily protesting against a political party. We are protesting against a government currently incumbent and in power. And what we need to do, I think, is wrest from them their ability to only have short-term objectives. It's just not going to work. And equally, because of that, they're not ever going to have the bravery and be bold enough to basically upset their electorate. And this issue has now got to a point where it is going to come with an economic cost. And we've seen that recently in the introduction of the EULA zones. Now, in order to meet those targets, people will have to change their vehicles. That comes with a cost. Some will be able to afford it and some won't. What we would like is for those who cannot afford to change those vehicles, they should be sufficiently subsidized. The state should support that transition, but that will come through taxation. I would like that taxation to start with those fossil fuel giants that are posting record profits in spite of us, some of us living in cold houses throughout the course of last winter, and presumably this. But ultimately, we will have to change the way that we live, change our minds and our practices, and that will come at a cost, not all economic, but in a way that we measure our quality of life, so on and so forth. But to be a contemporary politician in incredibly divisive times where populism is the easy option. I mean, let's just target the motorist and pretend we're all their friends. That's great. I mean, that's the sort of mindset that we're dealing with. We're not dealing with a mindset that's interested in making the long-term commitment to rectify these problems. And I think that's symptomatic not only of the culprits currently incumbent, but the system of politics that we have. And that's why it's increasingly important for us to act outside that system of politics in a fair, democratic, peaceful, non-violent way, but to make sure that whoever seeks office has to recognize that their investment is not about that term of office. It needs to go far beyond that. And that means we need brave, bold leaders. And at the moment, I'm afraid to say, we don't seem to have them. And that's why we are, as you said, Phoebe, increasingly angry. If we had people who we thought were leading us in the right direction, the direction that the Climate Change Committee, the government's own body, has told them to go in, if we had people who were doing what they've asked, and that is, bear in mind, they've asked the government for leadership, then we wouldn't be quite so unhappy. But in the absence of that leadership, it's down to us.
Thank you, Chris. You're quite right. Our leaders, I don't think, are brave or bold, but the people in this call and the people joining and supporting Just Stop Oil certainly are brave and bold. Lucas, is there anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, actually, everything Jeremy and Chris said, that's basically it, I think. And I would add, the term network corruption. So, for example, in the Netherlands, we see that people in the cabinet, the ministers, lots of them worked, for example, for Shell. When they move out of politics, they go back to, for example, lobbying organizations. So there's a network of people that share the same value systems, and it's really hard to get the other signals through that system. For example, of science, of course, that's the basis for what we do. So I think, just as Chris said, it's up to us citizens to not make it easy anymore to ignore us and to do peaceful disruption. So they then make it difficult for them to proceed in the way they do, and that's our job, I think, as citizens.
Thank you so much, Lucas. Chris, another question for you. We have no one left to vote for that actually understands and will act on the crisis we're in. That seems clear to see now. Rosebank oil field has just been approved by the government. Scientists are saying we're heading for civilizational collapse, and we have no one in government or in the system of government that is capable of or will do what's needed. So what should we be doing in order to save ourselves?
Well, we as a protest movement need a portfolio of techniques. And I think that's one of the things that's important about tonight. We're inviting people to this webinar so that they can think about what they are able to do to help us collectively, not just those on the webinar, but us as a species as it stands. But we have to recognize that there probably is not one magic bullet, one thing that we can do, which will turn, everything in the direction that we want to move it. So I think we have to be tolerant of the fact that there will be different ideas, so long as they share commonality and, crucially, urgency. urgency being the key thing, then we have to work together. And therefore we have to show patience to one another. And to facilitate that, we need we need kindness. And I know that kindness is an intrinsic part of what Just Stop Oil is about. This is a movement not of violence, but of love, a love for life, essentially, and a wish that we are able to continue that life. So I think when it comes to shaping our protests, there will be many things that people will be uncomfortable with. They won't be able to go that far. That, we need to nurture them through that process, make sure that they develop their confidence, develop their voice. They recognize the importance of their individual voice. They recognize, therefore, the importance of our community voice. And we help nurture them through those early steps. And I know, again, that's something that you're very keen to do with your workshops when it comes to explaining to people how to take part in non-violent direct action. So that's intrinsically important. As you mentioned in your introduction, I'm running something at the moment which is very much entry-level activism. It's nonewoil.com, and there we have a series of posters which people can download, print if they wish, or they can post them online, and they can send them to any potential elected representative of any party in the UK, and they're unambiguous in their request, and that is that there are no more fossil fuels removed from the ground, and there are no more subsidies given to those companies. And the message is very clear, and that is that if you do not satisfy that in your forthcoming manifestos, then you risk not getting our vote. And we, of course, are rational. We know that there are many things which will shape how people vote: cost of living crisis, state of the NHS. I mean, I could go on. There are many problems that we have in our UK society. But what we know very clearly now through recent polling is that the state of the environment, the state of our world in terms of its biological health, is right up there alongside all of those other concerns. So for the first time, when we go to the polls, whenever that election takes place, for the first time in our history, environment, if you like, is going to be on that agenda. So let's send a very clear message to all of our current politicians or aspiring politicians, and that is, if you don't give us something robust to vote for, if you don't give us a hope for a future for ourselves, our children and grandchildren, we will not vote for you. And if you do attain power, we will not get off your back until you satisfy those requirements.
Thank you, Chris. It's a really exciting new project to hear about. Links to nonewoil.com have been put in the chat, so check that out. Lucas, could you discuss the recent success of your strategy of overwhelming the police in the Netherlands?
Yes. Yeah. Since last year already, and now since September 9th, we do a daily roadblock, a permanent roadblock in front of the Parliament and the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Climate in The Hague. We started out with 25,000 people attending the demonstration. 2,900 arrests in the first day, and since then we proceeded every day, and like during weekdays, like 200 to 300 arrests. Yesterday, for example, was like 600. So you see the numbers going up again, and what we noticed is that the police are getting more and more difficulty getting us away. And of course start to complain, and they actually urge the cabinet to listen to us. And that's of course for a police really something really special that they do it. And it means, I think, that the pressure is on, and we will just continue doing it. So something has to give, and we won't give in. Our strategy is set in concrete, and the fact that it's set in concrete is part of the strategy. We go there every day. We won't leave. We stay peaceful, and we won't leave until all the fossil fuel subsidies are abolished. And we see that strikes a chord in people, and people are coming back when people do it for the first time. They actually enjoy it, bad as it may be to get arrested. We have good vibes, and they come back. So people go now for the 4th, 5th, 6th time and keep coming back. And this week we saw that the police sort of gave up in keeping us off the road, and they let us in, and then they came later. So it's sort of getting the first flickering of what do they do? Maybe they give up at all. So we're really getting there. And of course, it's not about it's not a fight with the police. It's not a fight at all. But we see the pillars of power, so to speak, stumbling. And I think we're getting there. The reaction of the government are not what we want. They don't even really react, actually. That is really bad. But on the other hand, you see also that people are getting more and more determined to proceed with the demonstrations. And what I said, we see the numbers going up a little bit even. It is quite something to announce a permanent blockade every day, but we do it, and it works out, and we just proceed, and everybody is feeling it. So that's it.
Thank you so much, Lucas. I've been so excited seeing it unfold every day, and I think the loveliest thing for me to hear is that you're seeing people coming back, because that's one of the biggest things I found being in resistance is the joy in it. People seem so often to see our fear and our rage, but not the love and joy in fighting against what you know is wrong. It looks like Jeremy has dropped off the call. It looks like he was in an allotment, so maybe signal or phone battery. So shame. I thought that was a good question for him. Might have got him. But after hearing about that incredible strategy from Lucas in the Netherlands, I think it would be great to move on to hearing a bit about Just Stop Oil's strategy, how you joining on this call can join us taking action. As I said, that poll is going to be displayed at the end about how you might like to get involved in the campaign. But first, we're going to hear a little bit from Indigo about Just Stop Oil's strategy. Indigo is part of the Just Stop Oil core team. She is a co-founder of Insulate Britain and Just Stop Oil. She's been arrested 16 times and has a 40-day suspended prison sentence for her actions demanding that the government take action on the climate emergency. And she promises that she won't stop taking action until the government just stops oil. So passing on to the amazing Indigo.
Hi, everyone. Amazing to see so many people on the call tonight. What's this, 691? I'm trying to imagine what that looks and feels like to be maybe sat on the A12 outside the Hague with 691 people. It's really hard to get a sense of that on Zoom. And thank you so much for everyone who's spoken to today so far. I really want to just touch on something that Phoebe just said. Although we have spoken a lot about anger and a lot about despair on this call, really what keeps us moving as a movement is this sense of love that we have for each other and for our families and for people around the world. And it's that sense of love that I get when I'm surrounded by people and we're taking action together that keeps me going time and time again to stand up against this genocidal government. And let's not beat around the bush. That is what is happening. Governments like ours around the world are pushing for the licensing of new oil, gas and coal, knowing full well that their decisions to sign off these projects will lead to the deaths of millions, if not billions, of people. And it's within our lifetime, isn't it, Phoebe, that we're going to see this unfold. Lots of things that are questioned now are speculation. We're going to watch happen. We're going to watch as we smash over 1.5 degrees of warming. We're going to watch as 40 degrees heat in a UK summer becomes normal. We're going to watch as climate catastrophes again and again unfold on our TV screens and perhaps closer to home. So what is it that we're doing in Just Stop Oil? We're saying that we can't face this on our own. It's impossible to face it on our own. What we need to do is to come together and realise our collective strength. Our whole lives were brought up saying, what are you going to do? What are you going to do as an individual? How are you going to live your life? And what you find within this movement is it doesn't matter what you do as an individual, it matters what you do together. And that's what we're going to be doing from the 29th, is blocking the streets together in groups of between 2 and thousands of people in different locations across London. And we're going to keep that non-violent core at the heart of everything we do. And another thing that I think we really, really need to understand about the action that we're taking, it's about refusing to comply with the system that is killing us. To not cooperate with evil is as much a duty as it is to cooperate with good. This means that if we know that the state is involved in activities which are leading to the deaths of millions of people, we can refuse to cooperate. So when we're marching on the roads, as many of you've done before, marching peacefully down the street with a banner saying "Just Stop Oil," and police come up to us, as we know that they will, and they ask us to move off the street, we're going to say no. We will not cooperate with the system that locks up peaceful protesters at the same time that it licenses new oil and gas. We're going to refuse to do what the police say, and for this act of civil disobedience, we will be arrested. And we need you to come and join with us doing this. Please, 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 if you do one thing on this call, come to a non-violence training, meet some people who are involved and find out if this is something that you can do. Because this autumn is going to be a time not to miss. It's going to be a real moment in history. We've seen the news unfolding over the past few weeks. They've played their cards. They're going to double down on fossil fuels, extract every last drop and rip up the small number of commitments that they've made to us. Well, we're going to come back twofold, and thousands of people are going to be marching on the streets of London, the fossil fuel capital of the world. They're going to be marching at the busiest times at rush hour, and they're going to be refusing to do what the police say to them. Perhaps some of you are going to end up in court for these actions. And we declare in Just Stop Oil that the courts are now a site of resistance. It is people in these courts who are complicit with this fossil fuel system which is killing us. It's these courts that license new oil and gas, and they lock up our friends like Morgan and Marcus. I visited Marcus yesterday in High Point Prison, and he sends his love to everyone here on this call. He really does, and he's doing well. And it's really amazing to see this strength of resistance within him, which is just burning so strong, despite being in this horrible, horrible, bleak place where they're trying to make us feel bad for what actions we take. But there's nothing that they can do. There's no law that they can throw at us. There's no prison they can put us in. There's no fine that they can give us that's going to make us feel bad, because we know that we're on the right side of history, and we know that we're standing up at such a pivotal moment in time. So please, please come and join us. You'll meet really, really great people, and it's really going to push things to a new level of change. Since our actions have begun, we've already seen major political parties shifting to support this idea of no new oil and gas. We need to push this further and push for Labour to, when they come in, to revoke the licences that the Tories are granting at the moment. We know that this isn't a question of white van men versus Just Stop Oil. It's a question of the fossil fuel elite versus us all, and that's why we're going to come together as well on the 18th of November in a massive family-friendly march. Please put that date in your diary, 18th of November, where we're going to meet outside the Shell headquarters at midday and march around to the sites that are most complicit in this fossil fuel horror we find ourselves in. Back to you, Phoebe.
Thank you so much, Indigo. Finally, we're going to hear from another supporter of Just Stop Oil. Chiara is a computer science student who is helping to organise the Cambridge University Just Stop Oil student group. So welcome, Chiara.
Thank you so much. It's really fantastic to be in this call. So yeah, my name is Kiara. I'm 24 years old, and I'm by far the least eloquent person that you're gonna hear speaking here. But I'm here because I'm absolutely mad as hell, and there is nowhere else I'd rather be right now. So I'm someone that is originally from Italy, and I don't know if you've been following the news, but over the summer, that place was an oven, right? Absolutely record smashed everywhere. Is like many different parts of the world, it was experiencing climate collapse. And when you hear these things in the news, they're really, it's hard to make sense of what they feel like in person. So I can tell you this through the lens of my family, who is still in Italy, of what it means. So I have a sister who this July was 7 months pregnant and had to go through 2 named heat waves before it was even August, right? The temperatures that were gone on there, it was so hot that the tarmac melted, right? So you go for a walk and your feet sink into the pavement. It's beyond horrific, right? This is for weeks on end. We haven't even crossed 1.5, and this is the typical summer that we're gonna get. I don't know what an atypical summer is gonna look like, but I'm beyond terrified, right? And in the face of this unelected government wants more oil and gas, right? It's a complete and utter betrayal. The reason they want more oil and gas is so that their mates can buy another 12 houses, right? It's that simple. That's how cheap our lives are for them. So in the face of this, whenever I hear people talk about this as, an issue we're passionate about, or something to be a bit concerned about, I really feel it does make me feel kind of gross, because this is not like a niche policy thing. This is everything, and it's beyond terrifying. So the second, I'm telling you this because the second you emotionally connect with the disaster that we're in, there is no coming back from this. There is no unknowing the depths of the disaster we're in. And so the second I personally emotionally connected with this disaster, I booked myself for a non-violence training, and I was on the road taking action with Just Stop Oil on the next day, because there is simply no one else that is organizing in this way to do something about this disaster that we're in. And through the campaign, I met some of the most fantastic group of people that I've ever had the chance to meet in my life. Everyone is like massively friendly and is spending so much time of the day worrying about, having always perfect vibes in all the social spaces, which is a lot considering the situation we're in. So what I'm doing now in the campaign is I'm organizing a local group of students in my university, we're making a massive push to mobilize students in universities, because throughout history they've been at the forefront of social change. And I will be going into the next action phase in complete non-compliance with the British regime that is trying to murder us. So I'm planning on getting arrested 5 times in the course of the campaign at the end of October and November. Now, this is not something comfortable that I choose to do lightly, but at this point, I don't see anything else that I could be doing that would be more effective. It's not, I understand this is not something for everyone, but it's where I think I need to be at. And the most beautiful thing about Just Stop Oil is that we go into resistance with a smile on our faces. It's really beautiful to see the joy and the warmth you can get out of resistance against this death project. This is what I wanted to say.
Thank you so much, Chiara. You're not only eloquent, but you're also incredibly inspiring and brave and brilliant. So thank you. I just want to pass back to Chris quickly, who wants to say something about our friend Marcus, who Indigo mentioned.
Thanks, Phoebe. Yes, just a quick one. Indigo mentioned Marcus, one of the, along with Morgan, one of the protesters who was on the Dartford crossing. He is in prison for a disproportionately long time, a really unjust sentence which was passed. His partner, Holly Cullen-Davis, has a petition running. It's currently, I'm going to tell you what it's standing at the moment. It's standing at 141,589 signatures. It would be great if everyone on this call were to sign it, if they haven't already. The link is being posted as we speak by my friend and colleague, Emma Smart. And then it would be great if you would pass that on. We're so close to the 150, which is the next goal. And we all like nice round figures, don't we? So please, if you haven't already, please sign that on behalf of Marcus and Holly and their family. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that very important reminder, Chris. That's all the speakers that we've got today. But we're now going to be launching that poll and then going into the breakout rooms. It would be really great if you could stay for these breakout rooms. We want to give you a space to talk about how you feel after what you've heard. As I said, that poll is going to be going out now about how you might like to get involved in the campaign and support the demand of no new oil, gas and coal licensing. There's so many different ways to get involved. There's something for everyone. So I'm just going to remind you of the ways that people support the campaign. The first way that people do this is by committing to slow march with their region. Each region will be marching in London for a week and committing to get arrested at least once. The ask, taking action, is at least one arrest, but myself, Kiara and many others are committing to at least 5 arrests over the 3-week campaign. And myself, I'm going to be extending my non-compliance into the courts, truth-telling in court, committing contempt of court, and probably ending up on a short stay in remand. You may have read about that in the Daily Mirror. They released that thinking that that might stop us, that might foil our plans, but it won't be. Just a reminder, the dates that we're marching are the 29th of October to the 19th of November, and you can find which week your region is marching in online. The second way that people support the campaign is by attending a non-violence training. This training is not a commitment to take action. So if it's something you're still on the fence about, it's a really great way to make up your mind. By attending this training, you get a run through what taking action looks like, and it's a lovely way to get involved in the community. I am still really good friends with the people that I attended my non-violence training with. it's an excellent session, and I've learned a huge range of skills that I use in my life outside of civil resistance about effective communication. So it's a really valuable day. There's a calendar being sent in the chat, and these trainings are running all over the country in different regions pretty regularly in the run up to action. The third way that people get involved in the campaign is by volunteering their time. And there are so many different ways that you can do this. It's largely a non-arrestable, low risk of arrest role. So if you are somebody who is not prepared to put yourself in a position of potential arrest, there is still space with you, still space for you in the campaign. You are still needed and wanted, and your support is valued. There are so many different ways to help. So there is a form being posted in the chat where you can register interest. And there's also a weekly Zoom which runs on getting involved, so you can find the right area of the campaign you might like to volunteer in. And the fourth way that people support Just Stop Oil is by donating. As I said, I don't like asking people for donations. I know that we're all suffering under the same cost of living crisis, but grassroots donations are vital to keeping the campaign running. We're living within the system we're trying to change, so we need donations to be able to support people who want to play a vital part in the campaign. We normally ask that people donate what they make in 1 hour over 1 month, so it's kind of means tested, or if you're a student or on wage, then maybe the cost of a drink. I myself kind of think of it as sacrificing 2 pints to the pub a month, and I give 12 quid a month. Unfortunately, I live in London, so a pint is 6 quid. Before people go into breakout rooms, I just want to thank once again our incredible speakers for taking the time out of their busy schedules to come and join us. And thank you to everybody on this call. It is so amazing to see so many people joining tonight. And I really hope that that will translate into seeing people join us on the streets or in the community or in the campaign.